Superman is boring. I just can't get invested in him when he can do anything. For those reasons and plenty more, a lot of people don't like Superman. In fact, I'm hopeful for this to change over the next year, but I'd argue that the majority of people actively dislike Superman. But how exactly does James Gunn combat that? I mean, first off, to those people, I say, regardless of Gunn's movie, go read All-Star, For All Seasons, Up in the Sky, or any number of other Superman stories that depict why he's beyond interesting. But really, when it comes down to it, people dislike the inherent silliness of a superhero like Superman because they simply haven't seen or read a good story with them that challenges his identity and forces him to reveal just how inexhaustible his kindness is and his willpower to keep it. But for someone to experience a story that gets them to realize that takes the initial effort of spending money to purchase a comic, or doing it for free by going to readallcomics.com. And as much as I love comics, I'm lazy, and sometimes I don't even feel like doing that. Instead, putting on the most mindless, dumb action movie and turning my brain off. But trust me, go to that free website I mentioned earlier, give one of those Superman comics a try, and you will not be disappointed. Only this video isn't about Superman comic recommendations, which quite frankly is something that probably would have done so much better than this. But either way, go do that after this video because I could really use the views and watch time. But secondly, if you still don't feel like reading anything, you can just wait to watch this new Superman movie, because in its teaser trailer, that one complaint of Superman being too boring and too strong was the first and biggest thing addressed. So much so that it was almost contradictory to the overall hopeful vibes that Superman and this movie in general will be about. Almost. And I'll circle back around to that, because that does require some explaining, but what I find most astounding was the opening moments of that teaser. How this new Superman was seen for the first time crashing into Earth, wheezing and bloody. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and we'd seen glimpses of Superman from official photos or the many set leaks, but this was the first we'd seen of him in motion, making that striking image of him lying there in the Yamcha pose, spitting up blood, being one of the first things to come to mind when thinking of Gunn's Superman. That or this shot, because this is undeniably Superman, or this, or this, or this, or you know what, I think you get the point. Because every story about Superman at its foundation is about hope. That's what I'm talking about when I say that him being an underdog could be contradictory, given that there could be some tonal whiplash, and that is a possibility, especially if the movie suffers from second-rate writing. Though, if Creature Commandos and everything else Gunn has written isn't the clearest sign to you that Superman will be delicately and expertly handled, then I don't know what to tell you. Because my fear of this movie's failure may not be all the way at zero, but I have more than enough faith that there will be a balance of not just characters, but themes as well. And that's without even bringing up the biggest argument as to why Gunn is going to make Superman an underdog in this film. That being that any good story, superhero or not, will tear down its protagonist at some point, physically or emotionally or both. And their conflicts will be depicted as insurmountable, which makes sense considering that the point of conflict in a narrative is to make the main character lose everything that they care about or make it near impossible to achieve their goals. Also, it's more cathartic in the third act when they step up to whatever responsibility or duty they failed at. But getting back to this Superman specifically, because what all of this comes down to is Superman's power scaling, which can be so incredibly difficult to get right. He can sometimes be more or less powerful, at one point being so overpowered that he could move planets to different positions with ease. Yet that was more of a golden age thing, where the writers would put themselves into a corner all the time, and instead of thinking of something creative to get the characters out of it, they'd give Superman a new power, over and over again. And that was one of the reasons why the Donner and Lester Superman movies have him iconically turning back time or fixing the Great Wall of China with wall rebuilding laser eyes. Yet whether or not he's the overpowered Golden Age Superman, his power levels are entirely dependent on who's writing, and more important than that, who the villain is. Because it technically doesn't matter how strong Superman is, so long as the person he's going up against is a physical match for him. And I suspect that this movie is going to take place almost entirely on Earth, not branching out too much, but going out into the cosmos is how you relatively power down Superman, because everyone else out there is just as strong or stronger. which can and should be done in the sequel, but for now, Gunn is seemingly planning on separating this iteration of Superman from all of the others by making sure, right from the outset, to depict his weakness. And that's not about highlighting those weaknesses just for relatability, though that undeniably helps. That's there to show just how strong the character is, not physically, but emotionally, because he's able to overcome such hardships and win, all with a couple plus ultra punches because we all like cool action. But Superman is mainly about killing with kindness. And those comparative power levels, how much effort Superman has to exert to win a fight, which should be a lot, is precisely what can make him an underdog. He is literally meant to be the strongest superhero ever, though there's always someone to argue that a Green Lantern or even Plastic Man truly has the strongest abilities. But what makes Superman so super, and what has allowed him to stay in the public eye enduring almost a century of complaints and naysayers, is that kindness instilled in him by his unending hope. His true superpower, because he may not be human, but he was always meant to be the single greatest embodiment or distillation of the best humanity has to offer. And especially when combining that with Superman being the underdog of this story, striving to fight for the betterment of every living soul and change the status quo for a better tomorrow, that's a difficult idea to execute well, because there is such a fine line between sincere and lame, which is near impossible to identify given it's subjective to whatever pre-existing notions a viewer has. Yet I not only have faith that Gunn and everyone involved will nail that sincerity, but that it will set the standard for who a morally good person is in fiction. And I see that happening because of the little things added to the teaser trailer, like people chanting Superman's name, Crypto being seen, which brings a certain light hopefulness to the movie. But most of all, and what makes me believe that this Superman is going to be seen as an underdog, is the fact that he gets a can thrown at him by an angry protester, which demonstrates that in this world, this Superman is perceived to be too kind, or maybe even too weak-minded to fight back against an attack like that. Because people were way too scared of Snyder's Superman to ever even think of doing something like that. Yet Gunns has clearly put in effort to get people to think of him as someone who wouldn't ever dare to hurt a living soul. Someone who will always manage to rise above the hate. Which kind of reminds me of this one carpenter I've heard about, Dave. Real good guy. But in all seriousness, Superman is an inspiration, an ideal for the everyday person to strive for. And all of this leaves me with enough hope that this iteration of Superman will not just be comic accurate, but as much of an earnest underdog as they come. Someone who you can't help but root for. Similar to Captain America: The First Avenger, a movie that Gunn himself has pointed to, saying that the tone will align closely to it, which makes sense considering the same themes of standing up to bullies for the little guy will be dived into, and the fact that both characters, or at least the cinematic Captain America, are essentially the same, being written like a Pixar protagonist, where they are so morally correct that they don't change, instead inspiring change around them. Except rather than it being on a national scale like in Captain America, it'll be globally. Yet knowing that the character will face some beatdowns and emotional lows, I'm just excited to see exactly what kind of unbeatable conflicts he'll have to go up against. But what are your thoughts on whether or not Superman is going to be depicted as an underdog? Is that even possible in the first place? Leave a comment and let me know. And keep an eye on this playlist for my many upcoming Superman video essays, which next week's will be about whether or not Lois knows Clark's secret identity. Spoiler alert, I'm pretty confident she does. Or I might push my world's finest video up because everyone seems to be talking about it, and I do like boosting my SEO. And just judging from this thumbnail, you can or probably can't tell that I don't want to see these two combine. So tune in next week for my explanation of why that is. Or the thing about Lois. But anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.